I found out my husband had a second family on a Tuesday afternoon in October because his phone buzzed while he was in the shower and I glanced at the screen without thinking. I was not snooping. I want to say that clearly because it matters to me. I was not the suspicious wife going through his messages. I was a woman who had been married for 8 years, who trusted her husband completely, who had built what she believed was a real and honest life with another person. I was folding laundry on our bed. His phone was on the nightstand. It buzzed and I looked at it the way you look at anything that makes a sound near you. The message was from someone named Claire. It said, "The kids are asking when Dad is coming back." I read it 3 times. And then I sat down on the floor next to our bed, in the middle of the laundry I had been folding, and I stayed there for a very long time. I need to tell you the whole story. Not just the end of it, not just the part where everything collapsed, but the 8 years before that Tuesday. Because the thing about a betrayal this large is that it doesn't make sense without the life it was hiding inside of. And the life it was hiding inside of was mine. It was real. It was good. Or it was something I believed was good, which for 8 years amounted to the same thing. My name is Sarah. I'm 41 years old now. When this happened I was 39, and I had been married to a man named Daniel for 8 years. We met when I was 29, which felt at the time like exactly the right moment, old enough to know myself, young enough that everything still felt possible. He was 32. He worked in commercial real estate. He was tall and funny in the specific dry way that takes a minute to land, and he had a quality I have always valued above almost everything else in a person, which is that he made me feel like I was fully seen. That quality, I now understand, was not unique to me. We dated for 2 years before we got married. We bought a house in the suburbs. I worked as a pediatric nurse, which I had done since I was 24 and which I loved in the complicated, exhausting, deeply meaningful way that you love a job that asks more of you than you sometimes have to give. We tried for children for 3 years. It didn't happen. We went through all of it, the appointments and the tests and the procedures and the grief that moves through your body when something you want very badly turns out to be something your body won't allow. We came through it still together, which felt like proof of something. Like evidence of the kind of marriage we had. We were not trying anymore by the time I found out. We had made a peace with it, or what I thought was a peace. We had a good life. Travel, friends, a home I had made genuinely beautiful over years of small deliberate choices. We were happy. I was happy. I need you to understand that. Not performing happiness. Not telling myself I was happy to avoid looking at something I didn't want to see. Actually happy. The ordinary, unglamorous, deeply sustaining kind that doesn't make for exciting stories but makes for a life you are grateful for. That is what I believed I had. And I want to ask you something directly, because I think some of you watching this have been where I was, or are there right now. Have you ever felt completely certain about your life? Completely safe inside it? The kind of certain that you don't even examine because it has never given you reason to? That certainty is the most dangerous thing in the world. Not because certainty is bad, but because someone who loves you, someone who has chosen you and stood in front of witnesses and promised you, someone like that can use your certainty against you. Can use the safety you have given them as the very thing that makes the deception possible. Daniel used my trust as his cover story for 8 years. Let me tell you how. I said I found out on a Tuesday in October. What I haven't told you yet is what came before that Tuesday. Because looking back now, with the specific and brutal clarity of someone who has spent 2 years understanding what they missed, there were things. Not proof. Not anything that would have held up under examination at the time. But things. The first thing was the travel. Daniel's job required travel. This had always been true. Commercial real estate meant clients in other cities, site visits, conference appearances. In our early years together the travel was maybe once a month, sometimes less. Normal. Unremarkable. Then gradually, over the years, it became more frequent. More consistent. There was a city he went to more than any other, a city about 4 hours away by train that he described as his biggest developing market. He went there every few weeks. Sometimes for 2 or 3 days. Once for almost a week. I never questioned it. Why would I? His income was consistent. His work was real. I could see the results, the commissions, the professional relationships that existed on paper and in person at the events I occasionally attended with him. He was not neglecting me. He was present when he was home. He brought me things from the places he traveled. Small specific things, the kind of gifts that require actual attention, not airport purchases. I thought that was love. I did not yet understand that a man maintaining a double life has a very strong incentive to make both lives feel real. The second thing was the phone. Daniel had always been private about his phone. Not suspicious private, just personally private, the way some people are. He didn't hand it over freely, didn't leave it lying around the way I left mine. I had noticed this early in our relationship and filed it under personal boundary and moved on, because I respected personal boundaries, because I was not an insecure person, because I trusted him. Looking back, I can see that what I called a personal boundary was actually a very carefully maintained wall. The third thing was something he said once, about 3 years into our marriage, that I thought about exactly once at the time and then forgot. We were at dinner with friends. The conversation turned to children, other people's children, the particular chaos and joy of early parenthood that our friends were living through, and we were watching from the outside. Someone made a joke about school pickups and Daniel laughed and said, without thinking, the way you say things that are true without intending to say them, he said, that age is so great. That 3 to 5 window, when everything is magic. I looked at him. He looked back at me. From what I hear, he added, smoothly, easily, without a pause that could be measured. From what everyone says. I looked away. I thought, that was a strange thing to say. I did not think it again for 6 years. Because that is what I mean when I say Daniel was good at this. Not just the logistics, the scheduling and the stories and the management of 2 separate calendars. He was good at recovery. He was good at reading a room and adjusting in real time. He was good at taking a moment that had gone slightly wrong and smoothing it back into place so seamlessly that the wrongness seemed like something you had imagined. I had married a man who was exceptionally good at making reality feel like whatever he needed it to feel like. And I had spent 8 years calling that charm. The Tuesday in October. I was folding laundry. His phone buzzed. I looked. The kids are asking when Dad is coming back. I want to try to describe the next few minutes accurately because they are the minutes I come back to most often. Not because they were the worst, they weren't, the worst came later, but because they were the last minutes of my life as I had understood it, and I was aware of that in some cellular way even before my brain had finished processing what I had read. My first thought was completely rational. I thought, there is an explanation for this. A cousin's kids, a colleague's children, something I had not been told about, a context I was missing. I am a person who believes in explanations before I believe in catastrophe. My second thought arrived about 30 seconds after the first. It was not a thought exactly, more like a feeling. A slow, spreading coldness that started in my chest and moved outward through my body until my hands stopped what they were doing and my eyes stopped moving and I was just sitting, very still, in the middle of the bed I shared with my husband of 8 years. Daniel came out of the shower. He saw me sitting there. He saw the phone on the nightstand. He looked at my face. And I watched him, in real time, decide what version of this to give me. That moment, the moment of watching him decide, is the moment I think about most. Not the message. Not what came after. That specific half-second of calculation behind his eyes before he spoke. That is when I knew. Not what exactly. Not the full shape of it. But I knew that whatever was about to come out of his mouth was not going to be the truth, and I knew it because I recognized the look. I had seen it before and called it thoughtfulness, and it was not thoughtfulness. Whose kids? I said. My voice was very calm. I don't know how. What? The message. Whose kids are asking when their dad is coming back? He picked up the phone. He looked at the screen. He set it down. That's Claire, he said. She's a colleague. Her ex is unreliable and her kids have gotten attached to me as a kind of, I help out sometimes when she's in a bind. It's nothing, Sarah. It's just. What are their names? I said. He stopped. The kids, I said. If you've been helping out enough that they are asking when their dad is coming back, you know their names. The silence that followed was not long. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. But I have never in my life been more aware of a silence. He said, Ella and Maximum. He said it without hesitation. And that is the detail that I could not explain away, that I could not file under coincidence or misunderstanding. He knew those children's names. He knew them the way you know the names of people who exist in your life, not the way you know names you have just been given in a message. He knew their names because they were his. I did not say that out loud. Not yet. I said, very quietly, I need you to leave the room. He left. I sat on that bed for 2 hours. I want to be honest about what those 2 hours felt like. Because I think people imagine that the moment of discovering something like this is immediately dramatic. That you scream or you throw things or you dissolve. And maybe for some people it is. But for me it was something much quieter and much stranger. It was like watching a building come down in slow motion. Like watching every wall you thought was solid reveal itself to be made of something thinner than you knew. I did not cry. Not then. I thought. I went back through 8 years with a different set of eyes, and I looked at everything I had dismissed or explained or not examined, and I let myself see what was actually there. The travel to the same city every few weeks. The private phone. The dinner table comment about the 3 to 5 window. The times he had been unreachable. The times the explanation had been just slightly too smooth. I had not been blind. I had been trusting. There is a difference, and I have spent a long time making sure I understand that difference clearly. After 2 hours I walked downstairs. Daniel was in the kitchen. He was sitting at the table with a glass of water he had not drunk. When I came in, he looked up at me with the face of a man who has been sitting alone with something for 2 hours and has decided, finally, how much of it to give. I sat down across from him. I said, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Because whatever version you give me right now, I will find out what you left out. And if I have to find it out myself, it will be worse for you than telling me. He looked at the glass of water. He said, I have children. 2 words that ended the world I had been living in. How many? I said. 2. Ella is 7. Max is 5. 7 and 5. Our struggle with infertility had been ongoing for 3 years of our marriage. For 2 of those years, Daniel had a daughter. I want you to sit with that for a moment. While we were going to appointments. While I was going through procedures. While we were lying in bed at night with the grief of a thing we couldn't make happen, holding each other in the dark. During that time, he already had a child. I said, how long? He said, 8 years. 8 years. He had met Claire the year before we got married. He had been with her in some form, living a parallel life with her in some form, for the entirety of our relationship. Our engagement. Our wedding. Every year of our marriage. I stood up. I did not say anything else that night. I went upstairs. I took a bag from the closet, and I packed enough for 2 weeks. I called my friend Diane and I said, I need somewhere to go tonight. She said, come now. I came. I did not speak to Daniel again for 11 days. I am going to tell you what I did in those 11 days because I think it matters. I think how you respond in the first weeks after something like this shapes everything that comes after, and I want to be honest about it. I did not fall apart. I want to be careful about how I say that, because I don't mean I was strong in some admirable way. I mean I went into a very particular mode that I recognize now, looking back, as the same mode I go into at work when there is a crisis with a patient. You stop feeling for a period of time so that you can function. You put the emotion somewhere it will keep and you deal with what is in front of you and you feel the rest later. I called a lawyer on the 3rd day. Her name was Margaret. She told me to think carefully before making any moves that would signal to Daniel that a legal process was coming. She said the timing of how I proceeded would matter. I listened to every word. On the 5th day I drove, by myself, to the city Daniel traveled to every few weeks. I don't know exactly what I was looking for. Proof I already had enough of. Confirmation I had already received. I think I needed to see it. The physical place where the other half of his life existed. The street, the building, the ordinary geography of the world he had been living in while he was also living in mine. I found it without much difficulty. Daniel's phone contained more than enough. An address that appeared in his map's history dozens of times. I drove to the street. I parked. I sat in the car and I looked at the building. It was ordinary. That's the thing I remember most. A normal apartment building on a normal street. Flowers in a window box on the 3rd floor. A child's bicycle locked to the railing near the entrance. Ella's or Max's. One of the children my husband had been raising in this building while he came home to me on weekends and told me about his work trips. I sat there for a long time. And then I drove back. I called Margaret the next morning and told her I was ready to proceed. What Margaret found, with the help of a financial investigator, was that Daniel had been quietly moving money for years. Not dramatically. Not in amounts that would trigger alerts. But consistently, methodically, in the way that someone moves money when they are maintaining a second life that costs real money every month. Rent for an apartment. School fees for 2 children. Living expenses for a woman and her kids. Our money. Not just his income. Our joint assets, drawn on slowly and carefully over years, had been helping to fund the family I didn't know existed. I want to tell you how I felt when Margaret put those numbers in front of me. I had thought the worst moment was reading that message. I had thought the worst moment was sitting across from Daniel and hearing him say I have children. But this was worse. Because this was not just betrayal of love. This was deliberate, calculated theft from the person he had promised to build a life with. He had looked at me, at our life, at everything we had worked for together, and he had decided that it was a resource he could use for something else. I told Margaret to proceed with everything. The divorce process was long and grinding. What I will tell you is the shape of it. Daniel, when he understood that I had documentation of the financial movement, did not fight. This surprised me. His lawyer was not quiet. Lawyers rarely are. But Daniel himself, in the moments when we were in the same room, was subdued in a way I had never seen. Like a person who had been carrying something for a very long time and was, in some complicated way, relieved to put it down. I said this to him once. In a hallway outside a meeting room, just the two of us for a moment. I said, I need you to understand something. Whatever you are feeling right now, whatever relief you feel because this is over, you don't get to have that. Not in front of me. Not ever. He looked at me. He said, I know. It was the most honest thing he had said to me in 8 years. We divorced 14 months after that Tuesday in October. The settlement was favorable. The house was mine. A significant portion of the joint assets were mine, weighted in my direction by the documented financial diversion. Daniel's ability to walk away from what he had done to our finances was substantially curtailed. He moved to the city where Claire and the children lived. I have thought about Claire. She was, in her own way, a victim of Daniel too, involved with a man who was never fully available, never fully honest. I do not know what he told her about me. I chose not to find out. That was one of the harder choices. But letting go is not the same as forgiving. It is simply the choice to stop paying attention to something that is costing you more than it is giving you. I am still in the house. This surprised people. They expected me to sell it, to move, to start completely fresh. But I had chosen every piece of this house. I had made it what it was. I was not going to let Daniel's deception take my home from me as well. I repainted the bedroom. I changed the furniture. I made it mine in a way it had always been mine but now felt more deliberately, more consciously so. I went back to work the week after the divorce was finalized. The work I do, caring for sick children, supporting their families, had always mattered to me, but it mattered differently now. It was the thing that was entirely mine. Untouched by Daniel. Uncompromised by what he had done. Real in a way that I needed things to be real. I found a therapist named Rosario. She helped me understand something about myself that I have spent the time since trying to live with honestly. I had not been naive. I had been trusting. But my trust had also contained something else. A choice, not conscious but real, not to look too closely at things that might disturb a life I did not want disturbed. The travel. The phone. The dinner table comment. I had noticed all of it. I had chosen not to examine it. That is not the same as causing what Daniel did. But it is something I am responsible for understanding about myself. I notice things now. Not with suspicion, but with clear eyes. With the willingness to look at what is actually there rather than what I need to be there. 18 months after the divorce, I met someone. His name is Thomas. He is a quiet person with an honest face. He knew about Daniel before our third date because I told him clearly and early and without performing a version of myself that is easier to love. He listened. He asked good questions. He has never once given me a reason to examine anything too closely. That is not a small thing. That is, after everything, one of the largest things I have. I want to say something to the people watching this who are in a relationship right now where something feels slightly wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not proof of anything wrong. Just a door that is always closed, a question that always gets a slightly too smooth answer, a comment at a dinner table that you thought about once and then let go. I am not telling you to blow up your life based on a feeling. I am telling you to look. Just look clearly, with your own eyes, at what is actually in front of you. Not through the lens of the life you want to have. Not through the certainty you have built. Through your own clear eyes, at what is actually there. I had those eyes. I used them selectively. I will not make that choice again. Daniel is living in that city now with Claire. He pays what he is required to pay under our settlement, which has the teeth of a legal agreement and the enforcement of a woman who will not let it slide. He made choices for 8 years that were entirely his. The consequences of those choices are also entirely his. I did not ruin his life. His life is smaller than it was because he made it smaller with every lie, every transfer, every smooth recovery from a moment that went wrong. He built a smaller life by trying to live 2 large ones, and when it collapsed into something that fits inside what he actually earned. The truth made that happen. Not me. And here's what I want to leave you with. 8 years is a long time to be deceived. But it is also a long time to have built something real. The friendships I have are real. The career I have is real. The home I made is real. The version of myself I know, the one that went through all of this and came out still herself, still clear-eyed, still capable of love and trust and the ordinary daily courage that a good life requires, that version is the most real thing I have ever had. Daniel took 8 years. He did not take me. And that is the thing he never understood. That is the thing that every person who chooses deception over honesty never seems to understand. You can take someone's certainty. You can take their savings and their years and the future they thought they were building. You can take the version of the story they thought they were living, but you cannot take who they are. You cannot take what they are made of. And when the deception finally ends, and it always ends, because the maintenance of a lie is a full-time job that eventually breaks down, what is left on the other side is the person they actually were all along. I was always this person. I just had to lose everything else to see it clearly. And if you are watching this from inside a life that is about to change, if you are the person who just saw a message on a nightstand, or who is starting to let yourself look at the things you have been not looking at, I want you to know something. You will be okay. Not immediately. Not without cost. But you will be okay. And okay, after everything, is more than enough to build from. And that is where Sarah's story ends. Or maybe that is where she truly begins. 8 years of a marriage she believed in completely. A Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. And a woman who lost the life she thought she had and discovered, in the rubble of it, the life she was actually meant to build. If this story reached you somewhere real, leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done on that Tuesday night. Tell me if you think she made the right choices. I read every single comment. And if you are new here, welcome to Success Wisdom Stories. Subscribe. Because every week I bring you a story like this one. Where the truth shows up whether you invite it or not. Where the person they underestimated turns out to be the strongest person in the room. And where the life you build after the worst thing is always better than the life that was hiding it. I will see you in the next one.